So I was telling the team that I was very, very excited to see how many individuals for UNMC joined us today. This is the first time we do this together. And I was very excited that Nebraska Medicine has invited me to do that. So today we're going to be talking about performance management, nuts and bolts, and how does it go through this season? You know, we do it at UNMC per fiscal year. Next slide, please. So the items that we're going to cover today is the overview of how the process goes. How do we set accountabilities, the duties and the goals that we want to send that message to the employee so they know what to expect for the following year evaluation? How do we develop those measures that we use as we're evaluating? And of course, the ongoing coaching and feedback. And I do want to emphasize that the coaching and feedback should not be a once a year kind of thing. It should be on a regular basis so that that employee knows what is happening and how they can adjust their evaluation. And then, of course, how do we conduct an annual performance appraisal as a supervisor? Do want to mention that the performance evaluation policy, which is based on BOR at UNMC, requires that we do performance evaluations once a year for the fiscal year, during that fiscal year, and that we have to report that to the president's office. So I report to Chancellor Gold that they have all been completed, and then he goes ahead and reports that to president's office. The performance evaluations are to be completed by June 15 of every year. And then online staff performance evaluations, which is what we're talking about today, are housed in Unival. Next, please. So here is the circle that I was saying. It starts with when you first meet the employee off from your last performance evaluations. The manager and the employee sit down and say, okay, this is what I'm accountable for. These are the duties that you're supposed to complete, and these are the goals. Through that, then you also say, what are the measurements that you're going to take into consideration? For example, how many of these items were completed in a year? Were you always on time as expected, responding emails or completing certain tasks you're responsible for, and so on. So those are measured. This is what's going to tell me that you have done your job. And then, of course, the ongoing feedback, which brings us to the annual performance appraisal. And the goal is that during the annual performance appraisal, that employee is not surprised. They know what they were accountable for. They know how you were going to measure them, and they have received ongoing feedback throughout the year. So it shouldn't be a surprise what happens on that performance evaluation. Next, please. So first, like I said, when you first hire somebody, or maybe sometime when you're having issues with performance and maybe they do not understand or they were not aware that they're responsible of certain responsibilities, the best thing is to say, okay, what are the accountabilities and duties and goals in your position? So we all have a job description. We pull that job description. We make sure it's up to date. By the way, we can change the job description based on operation needs or because the job may have evolved, which, as you know, everything evolved. And with everything evolving, job descriptions are going to evolve too. So you double check that, and then you sit down with that employee and say, okay, these are the things that you are responsible for. In this case, I have an example of clerical accountabilities like records management, customer service, budget, and so on. Next, please. Duties are definitely important in measuring the outcomes that we set in each area. So when we say, you know, you are in charge of budget maintenance, what does that mean? And so you need to describe it. That means is process the payment and back charge the department cost center, reconcile the P card, maintain the files or receipts. Okay, then the goals are targets. We all have goals. By next year, you need to make A, B, C. And of course, those goals, by the way, need to be reasonable. You cannot ask for something that you know that no one could complete within the time frame that they have to get the job completed. Next, please. So when you have those accountability duties and goals, you need to be clear, like concise statement. aids understanding. State forcefully. Each objective should contain an action verb identifying exactly what will happen, like completes, manages, coordinates, analyzes, files. Is always good to have that action verb, even when you communicate with the employee, so that they understand that that's certainly what they're doing and what they're accountable for. And one of the things when you're creating the duties is good to include that employee. And I'm talking about a regular employee as you're updating their job descriptions and so on, because sometimes the jobs evolve so much that we supervisors are not aware of all the changes that may have happened, or we are aware of the changes, but we are not aware of all details of that change and what resulted in that employee desk or work duty. Next, please. In addition to that, you want to make them aware. For example, you are accountable for your work. You need to adapt. Change is not fun, but it's necessary nowadays. And at the end of the day, change is what I call a positive, because it brings that to another level of performance, or it brings that to the next step of what we're trying to do in the department. So adaptability is important, so that the employee understands that that's a value that you will be taking into consideration during your performance evaluation. Communication. How many times you see emails and you go, who wrote this? I think my 5-year-old could have done a better job. Um, so people forget that emails are business communication, the emails that you do within the organization. So that's one of the things you also want to brought up, your communication across the system with our customers, patients, employees, or whoever. If you're doing it with an email, you need to make sure that your written communication is proper. The same thing with verbal communication. Don't assume that other people understand what you're saying. You need to explain. So it's always expected that you take that into consideration. What do they know? What technology do they know? Or what technology they need to know? Because maybe you can set up training sessions. I mean, I know at UNMC we keep changing. Now we have the system, then we have the other system. So there's no way that somebody can learn that on their own. So what are the knowledge needed now that we made these changes, and how I can get this person trained so that they learn and they're successful in their job. Team focus. Are you a team player? For example, what needs to be done? I do have some time today and I'm here to help my team. Rather than that, not my job, and I'll just sit on my desk just browsing whatever I would like to browse, rather than helping my team members succeed. Customer quality, of course, we all know that what that is. And then we talk about leadership. And many times people think that leadership is only for leadership, and it's not. Leadership starts with any job in the organization. Is be the person that can be the example for everybody else. Take initiative on the work that you're going to do. So let them know all these are expectations so that they understand how that works. Would you just hold on a second? Sorry about that. I apologize. So we can go to the next slide. So measures, what do you look at? How is the work performed? How well is performed? So spelling errors in documents, customer complaints, not completing the work as directed, how much and how often. Um, Quantity alone does not provide a measure of quality. So sometimes people can say, well, I just made sure that I have 100% quality, but then at the same time, they need to learn to work a little bit quicker in doing their work, because that desk is expected to produce a little bit more. So those are the things that you also want to address. Variance against budget, then of course, these are people that are more responsible for budget and dollars amount. And then of course, is this individual, and they need to understand that too. That's why your constant communication, due dates, do they adhere to their schedule? Do they complete a project by the due date? And is it complete, or do they have a project every month? It all depends on what the job is. Next, please. So if you want to be more detailed, which is very helpful, what do we mean, for example, for budget maintenance in a particular position? So we say what that means is process payments and back charge appropriately the departments in a timely manner. They need to be accurate. And when you purchase, the same thing when you process the purchase card, and keep things organized, files, because if something is needed, we can find those documents that we're looking for. Next, please. This is what I call the fun part, to be honest. And we say ongoing coaching and feedback. I like calling it more mentoring. So rather than coaching, you're mentoring somebody to be successful, because that's what we want. And I think you'll have a greater impact with that employee. So you sit down and you say, I do want you to be successful, and I do want to help you to be successful. So let's sit down and say, what are the expectations on this job, so they're reasonable in the job that you're expected to do. Provide the tools, the training, the priorities, the reasonable time. It's hard many times. We go ahead and request something and we say, hey, I need for you to run me that report. It is a lot more helpful for their employee to know when you want that report, so that they can be up to date with the things that they need to do. Because many times what happened is, oh, I didn't know you needed it right away, so I thought you needed it next week. And so like that, they're not meeting your expectation. But at the same time, you need to take accountability by saying, this is when I need something. And providing that feedback, not only when they complete something incorrectly, but also when they do something correctly, to say, that's exactly what I'm looking at. This is where I need for you to focus on, so that they know they're doing a good job and they continue to do a good job in that particular area. And that's where your recognition and reward comes in. Now, we all know that sometimes it's hard to make sure that every employee that is doing a great job gets a Silver U or UNMC every month. It may not be possible, but there's other ways to do recognition and reward. It may be as simple things as a supervisor buying, and I'm making this up, okay? It depends on the supervisor, depends on the team. That, you know what, today I am bringing a fruit tray for everybody. Or today I'm just gonna bring some chocolates for everybody, just to say thank you for the work that they have completed. Those little things are very motivating for employees. Next, please. Effective coaching. Why is this so important? It's important because if you don't coach that person in a way that they understand what you want, and in a way that they also believe that you're trying to help them succeed, you're not going to get too far. So the first thing is, make sure you meet face to face. That's very important. There's times when you need to do that. There's times when an email suffices. There's time when you need to do a phone call and it suffices. So make sure you choose the appropriate medium to coach or mentor your employee. It's always good to ask, let me know what you were thinking. Can you share with me what happened with this process? Or is there any concerns you have? It seems like you're having issues or difficulties with the new system that was implemented. What will it help what will it help, or what can I do to help, so that you can learn the system and be sure that you have the skills that you need to that. Always encourage them to learn more and to be the best that they can be, and suggest room for improvement. Be action oriented. And then this is important too. Consult when the problem or setbacks occurs. Many times what happens is weeks go by and you go to the employee and they don't know what you're talking about. They go, oh, you're talking about that one thing 3 weeks ago. So you want to go right away, maybe in a day or two, to say, hey, I noticed this and I have some feedback for you on that. So I call it the mentoring time. I always go, I got mentoring time for you. And then confront when performance is not meeting expectations. If you have done everything else and it's still not meeting, then it's time to sit down and say, this cannot continue. This mistakes, for example, you have had 20 mistakes in the last week, is really affecting our customers, patients, students, or employees. And I expect you to really pay attention to the emails and what the customer is requesting and make sure that you respond accordingly and provide all the services that we need to provide. Next, please. Annual performance appraisal. Why? That's the big question. Some people believe in doing performance appraisal, some do not. And we also have companies that have determined if that is a way that they want to do their performance feedback or not. At UNMC, we still do the annual. So if anything, one of the things that the annual performance is helpful with, it establishes a formal documented measure of the employee performance. So at this time this year, this is where you were with what's expected of you. It generates information to support human resources decisions. So many times that will help you determine who do I want to promote within my department, who can be transferred, who can be reassigned, who may be demotion, who can be separated. Not that we want that, but sometimes we don't have a choice. So if you're going to separate an employee, for example, you need to have plenty of documentation that you have mentored, coached, and you have addressed those issues throughout to say, there's nothing more I can do. The way I see it, by the time you get there, if you have done everything else, you're not firing the employee's firing themselves because they did not follow up with you. They did not listen to what the requests were. They didn't put their part to be successful. Address areas of improvement and set plans to correct that, and then establish performance plan and discussions for the coming year. So this is where you say, and in Unival, we have that goal setting. I know we get overwhelmed, and I know we complete I don't know how many performance evaluations all at once, but it is important that you sit down with an employee and that you write it on the performance appraisal. What are the goals for next year? Like maybe learning a new system, going to some training, learning a new process because change took place, working with the team on a particular project and what their role will be, and so on, and expect that those things be completed. Next. The cost of non-management performance evaluations or performance throughout the year is one, poor employee retention. You probably wonder, what does that mean? Well, if I am doing my job and somebody else's job and you never address my neighbor, my coworker work, and I end up doing the majority, sooner or later, I'm going to look for another job. So you end up losing the good people because you're not paying attention to addressing the person that needs the coaching and the mentoring to be successful, or taking actions thereafter because they're not responding well to that mentoring and coaching. Poor safety records, a time that takes care. It's part of it, depending on the job you're doing. That individual is going to have poor productivity because they don't know what your expectations are. You never follow up with them. So they're kind of going, I don't know, I'm just doing whatever I can, thinking of what I can. Lost the work days, because then what happens is I don't have much to do at work, so I'm just going to call sick in for today. And low morale, because the rest of the department is noticing the same thing. Many times these things are hidden, but they can really affect your department. Next. Keep in mind that you need to be objective when you're completing a performance appraisal. It's not a personal item. It's not the time to say, I'm not going to forget certain things that this individual did, and this is my opportunity. It's the time to be objective and fair. So you want to be honest, justice, meaning just with that employee, and you don't want to have any inappropriate influence during your evaluation. So these are very important. Be fair, impartial, equitable, candid. You can say the same thing in a nice way. You don't need to be offensive, or you don't need to be too harsh. And sometimes when you're too harsh, you don't get to the point, but you can be candid and still say what you need to say. And we can move to the next slide. when you're writing your appraisal, collect all your data. Like we covered already, what are the accountability duties and the goals? Employee data factual, what they have done well, what they have not done well, any critical incidents that you have that may need to also be addressed during the performance evaluation. Review last year appraisals. That's very important because in the last year you get to see what the goals were that was set. Did the employee meet those goals? And if they didn't meet those goals, was there a good reason why? And remember, change happens, and sometimes it's because of that. And then review well what the employee is saying on their evaluation. That's self-appraisal. As you know, we do first the employee does their own, and then we review as supervisors and do our section. Next, please. And we talked a little bit about this when you do your final rating. Most likely, I think that one of the things that you do is you compare everybody in your team to say who's my top and who is, and from there you go on your scale about to see who deserves to be promoted, what growth opportunity we may provide, and so on. Or are they satisfactory? If they're satisfactory, they may still be able to be promoted. It all depends on the kind of work that they do, what growth opportunities we may provide. Should we change some of the responsibilities or not? And then unsatisfactory, of course, the performance that needs to be corrected. Three ideas, summary for each accountability. One of the things is statements summarizing how the person did with the overall accountability, specific statement regarding that, and statements pertaining to continued performance, improve, stays the same, and so on. Next. And this is really repeats of what I said before, things to keep in mind. Comments need to be objective and factual, I'm sorry. Bias-free, that's very important, please. Keep this in mind, bias-free. Some you will have high score and some you will have lower scores. And summary section, a good place to codify your overall message and let it settle before discussion or handing in. And we can go to the next. At UNMC, our performance appraisal has 4 numbers. So it's either a 1, or 2, or 3, or a 4. 0 means that it's not applicable. Sometimes it may be that the system has added, because the administrator added an item to be evaluated, but that item doesn't apply to your group. So as a supervisor, you can say that that's not applicable. Or it may be that the employee has not been there long enough for you to determine if they are meeting expectations with that. Then if you receive a 1, it's unsatisfactory performance. And what that means is seldom meets established standards, must improve in order to continue employment. 2 needs improvement. And what that means pretty much is sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You need to be consistent in your performance. And that's what that one says. And then the 3, they're doing their job, meet expectations. They're just doing their job. And once in a while, they exceed established standards. And then you have the exceed expectations. And I would like to make a distinction between the meet and the exceed. The exceed is really when it's on a regular basis that employee goes above and beyond to do their work. The meet expectations is they're doing what their job description says or what the things that they have done. So that doesn't make it exceed expectations. Exceed expectations when you go above what's on your desk, what that person has on their desk and responsibilities, and do so on a regular basis. Next, please. Evaluation areas that I would like for you to keep in mind. These are called the hollow and the horns. Failing to discriminate between the person's strong and weak points. So sometimes everything that person does is wrong or everything that person does is right. Nobody's perfect. And you may have, okay, that's not necessarily true. So you need to be objective with that. The next one is you're too strict, too lenient. Very little differentiation between good and poor performance. So keep that in mind. Central tendency. What we tend to do sometimes is not to, and this happens to supervisors that have a hard time evaluating and giving feedback, and they don't want anybody upset. So they go ahead and grade everyone with the same. You're all in the same boat. You're all threes, rather than making sure that those that are doing better get that four, a much better, and those that are not go to the two or the one, depending on what needs to be for that individual. And personal bias. We all are human beings and we do have biases. So we need to be aware of those biases so they don't come through as we're evaluating. Biases such as race, age, and so on. And the other thing is when you're writing appraisal, we have what is called legal defensible evaluation. So when I write and this is because I'm in HR, I always go, will I be proud if this document becomes part of a um, legal issue? Yes or no? So I'm asking you to always keep that in mind so that, you know, if somebody else like a court, like another attorney is reviewing this, will I be proud of what I wrote? Is it clear for everybody to understand what I meant to say about the employee performance? Is it fair? Do I have everything that will solidify what I'm saying? In essence, your documentation. Are all your statements relevant? Is reliable, meaning that yes, this is for truth, because I got everything else that I need to do, and I was subjective. I was not subjective, I was objective when completing this evaluation. Next. So when it's time to conduct an appraisal discussion, one, review the agenda on what you're going to go through the evaluation. Then you go ahead and review performance appraisal with the employee. And it does say in here, starting with the most positive thing. Now, granted, the way we're set up, it goes step by step, so we tend to start with the beginning. But there is always nice you can say to the employee before you even start the process to say, thank you for being here. I do appreciate that you're part of my team. As you know, there's a lot of things that you do great, but there's some stuff that I need to cover with you so that we're all on the same page. Clearly describe that gap between the desire and the actual performance. Describe the unwanted behavior. Express how this impacts you, others, the organization. Specify the behavior you would like to observe and consequences if not corrected. Next. This is hard. Use active listening when employee is expressing their view. Many times we kind of get frustrated because we're going, I'm listening to you now, can we move? But it's very important that you use good listening skills because you'll be amazed if you pay attention. Sometimes they bring up something that you didn't think about it. So let them say their piece. I call it whatever they have to say, allow them to express themselves. Don't interrupt them when they're speaking unless you're going on and on and on and on and on. But there's ways to say, okay, we need to move to the next value. Many times it's good to paraphrase what they're saying so that you understand and they agree that you're understanding what issue they're bringing up. And ask open-ended question, like tell me about that if that's where you are, that the employee has a different view of what you have. And avoid close question. Always stay calm. So I suggest supervisors need to have a good night's sleep, be in a good mood in the next morning. If what makes you happy is a cup of tea in the morning or a cup of coffee, be sure to have it. If you have breakfast in the morning, usually, because that's what you like to do, make sure you do that too. In essence, you set your mind and your day to be a positive day so that when you're meeting with that employee, you can be calm and you can support everything that you have to say with the facts backing what you're saying. Next. And this is pretty much what we have been talking about it. So I'm not going to go into that because we already talked about that. So we can continue. So then he comes, okay, what's my reward and recognition? There can be money, fund prices, and so on. Now we are UNMC. We're not a private sector. And we all know that our budget is dependent on the budget that the state of Nebraska gives us. So money sometimes is not the greatest thing for us to use because we have a budget that is quite tight, and sometimes it may be very hard to demonstrate recognition with money. However, you can think of different things like nominating your employee for a silver U, nominating an employee for a gold U, send them a thank you note via our reward and recognition system with points. That's a way to also say thank you. Giving them more flexibility with their schedule than you give everybody else just because they're doing a great job. That may be things like, okay, if you want to change your schedule to 8:30 to 5:30, that is not going to affect operation. I don't have an issue with that. And then if the other day, because things do happen in life, employee may be an hour late because something came up. An employee says, I'm going to pick up my half an hour, my half an hour the next following 2 days, then be flexible and things like that. So they know that they have your trust. The other things is personal growth and training that you can provide. You know how much free training there is out there? There's tons. There is reimagining you. If you go into Firefly, there's tons of different things that they can do training wise that are self-paced and some that are with a facilitator, and they can use that too. You say, you know what, I do want you to go and take this class or participate on this, because that just gives them something that is positive and a learning opportunity. Another thing is if they're doing a great job and you're trying to mentor them to be on the next level, depending on the job that they have, start delegating more authority, start trusting them with additional things. Assign projects if that's what they want. Keep them in the loop with things that they would like to do. And then, of course, if there is an opportunity for promotion, keep them in mind. Next. So there was a Gallup study, and I just wanted to share that. Look at over 800 managers in 400 companies to determine what keeps your best people satisfied, and came up with 12 factors, 3 of which relate to recognition. In the last 7 days, have you received recognition or praise for a job well done? Does your supervisor seem to care about you as a person? Is there someone at work who encourages your development? Next. So those are the questions that you need to answer yourself. So you wrap it up in your performance evaluation. We talked about it. What are the goals for next year? And then discuss, of course, the training and development opportunities so that they can also reach success in their career. Do like to emphasize every time that one of your employees is successful and it's promoted and is flourishing in their career, it's a good feeling to know that you help them do that. It's our job as a supervisors to mentor and grow that employee for the next step in their career, if that's what they want to do, because not everybody, but at least 50% do want to be promoted, do want to grow in their job or opportunities at the university. So keep that in mind, because when they succeed at the end, you have part of that success and it feels pretty good. Next. Do you have any questions for me?
If anyone has any questions, they can place them in the chat or come off mute. Carmen, I guess I have a question as maybe the employee filling out the performance appraisal. One thing you talked about is as a manager, you should look back at their goals for the year prior and kind of make comments about maybe they didn't hit this goal or that goal. As the employee, do you also put that into your evaluation? Like, this was my goal last year. I didn't do this because of X, so it's in writing.
They can't. What happened is you go what we call value by value, and they rate themselves. And as they rate themselves, they can add all the notes, or we always tell the employee, you need to add in here what justifies your rating. So if you're rating yourself as a 3, then you need to justify that rating with examples of work of what you have completed. And at the end of the evaluation, the employee, after the supervisor submits it, employees got to review it before they signing that there was a meeting and that there was a performance evaluation. So if they want to add any additional comments, they can. But they are told that that's part of the process, that they need to look at, did you meet your performance goals throughout the year? They're accountable to make sure they mention it in all the values, applicable values. Helps?
Yes, perfect. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Okay, I want to say thank you to everybody. And you can always email me if you have a question that you didn't want to do as a group, or you have a particular case or item that you will not. Oh, look, is there a requirement for managers to complete this training, such as today? It's not mandatory, Laura, but I am very happy that you joined on your own. Is that correct? I mean, I know for UNMC it's not mandatory. And then I have Kelly Scroggin saying we will add it to our EPP website. Did I answer your question, Laura?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, the other questions are more for Nebraska Medicine, because they're so kind to coordinate this and they're taping the class. I don't know what you're doing with that.
Yes, so we will add this recording to our EPP website, and it'll also come out in one of our upcoming EPP newsletters.
And you can also do the PowerPoint if you want to. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Carmen. Well, if nobody else has any questions, we will go ahead and close the room. And thank you all so much for participating today. I hope you got some great tools out of this. And as Carmen said, if you have any questions, please feel free to send her a message.